And most of that comes down to the fact that of just like object permanence, right? Mm-hmm. It's just things that are out of sight, out of mind. And whatever's in sight is what is in mind. And I think this is why phones can be such a problem, because it's just whatever the thing I'm looking at, it's all I'm thinking about. I stop thinking about time. I stop thinking about the projects I need to be working on. And even though I can find that like interesting research rabbit hole to be incredibly cognitively rewarding, it still means everything else has become out of sight, out of mind. And that's where it gets really damaging. So when I have a place to go to work, it feels like time for me to put in front of me the things that I need to be working on. It's putting it into sight.
This commute conversation about how powerful it is to have things built into your life that you don't have to choose to do, but you just participate in, and they just so happen to be really healthy. A practice that you're not needing to work at doing, but a practice that you are just doing.
Yeah.
Like that, and I think this is something that is so helpful for living in a fleshy sack of bones with skin wrapped around it, is to do things where instead of striving or pushing or planning, you are participating in observing and actually just being in the lived experience.
Yeah. And I think this is why like the tips things can be so hard.
Jesse, what's that on your forehead?
Don't even. I got a little goose egg. I'm actually surprised it's still showing because I got a package in the mail this morning. I didn't know what it was. I got excited and I swung the door open, and right away in front of the delivery guy, just door straight into my face. And I was like, oh, and I definitely dropped an F-bomb. He's like, are you okay? I was like, yeah, thanks for the package. I just took it. And then the worst part is it wasn't just like, are you okay? Right? Because he says, are you okay? And I say, fine. I take the package. He's like, seriously, are you all right? You know what I mean? That's the genuine concern that follows the formal, polite concern.
Well, at that point, you've hit your head so hard. Like, I haven't had many head injuries, but I'm assuming if you clock your head, your body's trying to like assure itself that it's okay. Yeah. But to everyone else, they're watching you go through this like freak out moment.
Yeah, you're like stumbling and slurring my words. It was okay. It was comedic, and right away I knew it wasn't concussion head injury, but I also knew it was probably going to be a bump.
See, that's what you think. You think you know it's not a concussion, but the delivery guy, when he goes home to his family today, he's going to say, I saw a guy get a concussion. Yeah. So excited to get his package. Your commute this morning, tell me about it.
Snowy. It was very snowy. And I forgot it was going to be snowy, even though I knew. We planned this call for 11 a.m. my time, 8 a.m. your time. I knew that a snowstorm was supposed to hit here at 5 a.m. And then you texted me at 10:15 and said, like, excited to record today or something. And I was sitting at home watching the snowstorm, and I went, I have to walk in this. I don't actually have to. I could drive, but I don't want to. Partly because my van is just dying a slow Canadian wintry death. It can't start in the cold. It slips around in the snow. It's getting rusty.
Did you ever give it a name?
Oh, Bonnie?
Bonnie? It's Bonnie. Oh, yeah. I like that.
It's a Mazda Bongo. I can't remember. I think my wife named it. But then we looked online, and apparently a lot of people with Bongos call them Bonnie. So it feels a little less
special. To be fair, we did get recording within an hour of our start time, which I'll take that as an absolute win.
Yeah, same. I mean, given that one time we were 18 months late to record a podcast, I feel like
I'll take it as an absolute win.
Yeah, that's a 99.99% improvement.
So my brain is going like full scramble because there has been a lot of life change, and I'm excited about. There's certain layers of life change that are all exciting, and I want to get into all of them at once. It's like your classic problem.
Yeah.
I think it would be best to track in on like one thought right now, and the thought is actually centered around the commute to work. So I was commuting, and for me to say that sentence means that there's been a lot of life change because I don't normally commute.
Yeah, you've got a little space.
I've got a little office. Yeah. I've been editing from where I sleep, either in the van or in a basement suite of some kind.
Yeah.
I've been editing from where I live since about 2015.
That's
So like 8 years.
a lot.
And so I'm quite excited because there's been some progressions in the last little bit, progressions that are making things like scheduling podcasts feel more possible in my life. Because I think something that has to be acknowledged at some point is like the last 3 years was like a steady decline to probably the most challenging space I've been in as just a human being. We haven't danced around that very lightly. Like we've addressed that. Yeah. We've addressed the whole like, hey, Levi's not doing very well. Like we've talked about that. So something's exciting, and that is things are going better. And my brain just so badly wants to just brain dump all of it. And we're going to pause on that. We're not going to, okay?
You're
Hold me
giving
to
me
that.
like dialogue blue balls, because I just want to know about all of these things. You're like, I've got 30 of the most exciting things that you've ever heard.
Well,
coming
okay,
to a conversation near you.
I'm gonna do it again here. I have an important question to ask you about cold commutes in the winter. So this is a very important question because I've been commuting right now, and this has been a very important question to me. So I have to ask you this.
Ask me.
But welcome to the Make Stuff Club, the show for dysfunctional creatives, where the goal is simple: make good stuff, make some money, and as much as possible, avoid self-sabotaging your work, your relationships, and your life in the process.
And always hype up what you're going to talk about and then leave me hanging.
Right. And always hype up what you're going to talk about. I'm Levi. I make videos on the internet. I call myself an adventure filmmaker because that makes me feel better about my life.
Yeah, I'm Jesse, and I also make videos for the internet, but that's where my title ends. I just say internet videos. And most of that used to be so that, people could make up their own mind about what I did. But the other part is that like, I don't know what I do. It's like, I think I'm a YouTuber, but I don't know. I make internet videos.
Well, according to our first podcast in Hawaii, you're also doing some social work.
Yeah. I was like, then it transitioned to much more of my social work, my true passion, social work, things like posing with smoothies on Instagram and wearing leggings. I don't know.
I appreciated that because like we will literally do anything to avoid saying the word influencer work.
Yeah.
Like even though brands that are trying to reach customers are paying us to help reach customers. Literally the definition of influencing.
It's the influence that
and
they
that's
want. Yeah.
part of the way that you started making money from Instagram and from YouTube. And I just love that your brain went to, some of my social work. And then later you're like messaging me and you're like, it's not social work.
Yeah.
I do. Okay. I'm thrilled. And and this is where I'm excited for this to be malleable, plastic, formable. I have this like underpinning idea that if you're going to spend time making a thing, I mean, if you're making art, your art can just be expressive and it can come from an expressive place. But I struggle with like the idea of making art not also participating through the lens of how the art gets experienced. Like to me, art gets made for people to experience.
Yeah.
Like what you make personally for just yourself could also be art, but that's not like the general term I think of as art. So not saying that something like a podcast like this has to be art, but I think a lot of the things that we spend time making are artful, especially if you're trying to do it creatively. And I do think if we spend time like making things like podcast episodes, in order for that to feel rewarding over the long term and actually not just be an exercise in vanity, it should be somewhat beneficial in the life of the people experiencing it. So or the people that we're putting it out there for.
Yeah. So you're keeping them in mind in all of the things you're making. But was there a question with that? Like, are you wondering if that's?
Well, part of it is I've been completely thrilled to find out that the conversations that we've recorded so far truthfully, we're coming from a place of I want to have these conversations. So it's more of a selfish thing. But it's so rewarding to me to see other voices in the comments of some of these episodes on YouTube. This is what I like YouTube for, because you can have some of that back and forth, or also on Twitter. And me and you, we've been getting DMs from people being like, thank you for talking about these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I think that was my hope, is like I felt a bit of a vacuum in the space that we occupy of voices that would share more of that dysfunctional component in the pursuit. But like, this is where I want to be plastic and like malleable with it, is that I think my original intent was a knee-jerk reaction of like, I don't want to share any tips or any solutions.
Right. You didn't want it to be a guru, how to be a filmmaker podcast, or how to be a maker, whatever, with these simple steps.
I think also what happens with that is if I personally am consuming a lot of content with tips, it can make this overwhelming sense of, oh, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing good enough. Other people find this easier. So maybe hear me out here. It would be interesting to me if at just a baseline, we are trying our best to document what does the process of making things we like look like week to week.
Yeah.
So like that's at its minimum. And to me, there's so much room in that conversation for the struggle part of it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I would say that most of the day-to-day, week-to-week, what it looks like for me anyways to make things it's certainly at least as much struggle. It's not mostly creative flow state. It's maybe 80% struggle and 20% flow state. But then you do the flow state and you're like, yeah, I love this. I'll only remember this part until deadlines roll around.
I think what I was forgetting is some of the things that help us get to that flow state are those things that I have a knee-jerk reaction against, like the tips and the tricks and the solutions.
Yeah.
And so this is where I think we'll have to check ourselves, and this might be like the sinusoidal wave of this experience where sometimes I want to be able to give us permission to sometimes share some of our cool tips and tricks, because I love tips and tricks. I'm realizing like, why would I ignore that part of my life? I mean, me and you were just talking at length about like microphones and like we like the little novelty things that this is why we do video and not painting. Like we like the gear and the tips and the strategies. Yeah. So I think at its heart, where this will be its best is trying to overcome the obstacles to make things we like. I think that's where it'll be at its best. But also, I want it to be helpful. And so I think it can be helpful just talking about that. But I also, because so many people have been like connecting, if they aren't ADHD themselves, they're connecting with that struggle. And that's a struggle that can be benefited by strategy.
I think you're completely right. I think I also have that same knee-jerk reaction to like basically any video that tells me that it's like a 5 tips, because I read it right away as you're oversimplifying, you're skimming things, you're just, that people are going to click this and it's not going to be as good as it's hyped up, that kind of thing. But I've also heard that this is somewhat typical of people like in the ADHD realm, and maybe people relate to this probably everywhere, but the tendency to just swing from one end all the way to the other right away. Like there's just no middle ground. We're just all in. So I might be in a season where I'm like, right, tips. We got to break it down. And then suddenly now I'm like, I see tips everywhere. You know what? They're gone from my life. They're dead to me now. And I can also recognize that that's basically never been a helpful strategy for me, even though it has been a consistently practiced one. So I do agree. I think finding that balance where we're being thoughtful about what we're providing or whatever, without ever trying to take this stance of authority, let's say.
Yes.
Because we're certainly not authorities on ADHD. We're also not authorities on mental health. We're not even authorities on being YouTubers or filmmakers. We just happen to have experience in a lot of those realms. And the Venn diagram of the crossover of them, it seems like it's quite a lot of people. So yeah, there doesn't seem to be a reason to like hide some of those little aspects of our lives just because of a fear of, I don't know, being perceived as if I'm saying more than I have the right to say, that I'm speaking out of experience rather than authority. So, if we're giving tips, take it with a grain of salt, give it a shot. It's just going to be things that worked for us for a minute anyways.
Yeah, I find it kind of like humorous that we might have this breadcrumb trail of tips that we've tried, but all of like eventually failing at all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Cody,
did we talk about this once in a podcast where I had that experience forever of like, I'll try a journal, I'll try this routine.
Yes, we did talk about this,
that all the time. And it wasn't until just realizing that probably none of them are ever just going to like stick and feel like the one thing. But that doesn't mean that I swing to the polar end and do none of them. Because maybe the most helpful thing for me is to always be in the state where I'm trying to see like what that next thing would be. Because at the very least, it might give me a week, a month, right? It'll actually provide some short-term benefit that may not be all-encompassing in my life going forward. But I still remember tips and tricks from all these little things that I've tried and failed. Even journaling techniques or, morning routine techniques. I don't know. What other kind of techniques? What kind of things have you picked up and then just through no fault of that techniques, you dropped?
Well, a very simple one that just infuriates me because I feel like I'm in control, and it's not an addiction, but removing my addictive apps from the phone works.
Yeah, I saw you talking about that.
So dumb.
I'm annoyed because I see you tweet about it, and I'm like, I'm not going to read that right now because then I have to think about it, and then I have to probably admit Levi's right, and then I have to make changes. So I'm currently sitting in cognitive dissonance where I'm just going, nah, not for me.
I can't think of a single time I've seen someone post about, I'm taking a break from this. And I felt like, yeah, I want to hear that from you right now. Like I've never felt that. And then I keep encountering some of these people that I look up to that regularly take massive breaks. Well, and I can just look and this is a topic for another time, but like I got to a point, and it's not, for me, it gets annoying when some of this discussion around phones is centered around social media.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Because for me, my addiction with finding dopamine on my phone has next to nothing to do with social media and everything to do with me playing the slot machine of these interesting places I can find interesting things.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I love to consume information. And I am insatiable when it comes to that. And so even
it's ravenous. It never stops.
My like enjoyment of TikTok or the times when I can do it.
Yes.
You're right. It is the slot machine, but my slot machine is always like for a piece of hyper interesting content. And the weird thing is it pays off like very often. My time on my phone or on the internet, I think is mostly characterized by interacting with just really interesting things. It doesn't feel like that, maybe the kind of dumbed down characterization of like mindless technology zombies. I actually feel like my mind is working in overdrive, and I get that that's enjoyable, but I also have to recognize when that's harmful. Because
do you feel like you're in control? Because what I feel like when I'm doing that is I'm in control of this and I'm still interested, so I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. I think the experience feels like I'm choosing to stay there. But
yeah, I had to reach a point where I realized, oh, this has control over me, and that was terrifying to admit.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's do an episode on that. Like not an episode telling people that they have to remove apps off their phone, but specifically one around like finding interesting things as a way to cope. That's to say, there has been some really helpful things around. I have a new therapist that I started with in December, so actually right around the Hawaii trip.
Yeah.
And some of the conversations I've been having with this therapist have been really surprisingly effective. The therapist specializes in neurodivergent people. And so the empowering way that some of the internal conversations I've been having with myself have been being rewritten around a more like ADHD positive perspective makes me very excited. And that's why I was kind of talking about some of the strategy stuff, is that I found a lot of life in the strategy. But to pull the biggest callback of all time, I told you that I wanted to talk about commuting in the winter.
Thank you. Yes. There was a point where I thought about it. I was like, I can't wait to find out how this pulls back together.
Okay. I absolutely fell in love with your commute sequences that you'd make on your Instagram stories on your one wheel. Loved it.
Yeah.
And I especially loved the ones where, as the weather got worse, you were still like shredding on your one wheel to the studio.
Yeah.
So when the weather gets bad, because you've ridden your one wheel to the studio in snow.
Yeah. Every weather.
All year.
Yeah.
Every weather.
All
of the weathers.
All weather.
Okay, so here's my big question.
It's all-wheel drive. I don't know if you know that.
Have you... It's all one wheel.
All of the wheel drives.
Have you gotten cold on any of those commutes?
Probably. I don't really remember it necessarily, but I'm a bundler. I bundle the heck up. Electric gloves, full winter boots. My coat goes like past my knees and is, it's Gore-Tex and full of down and stuff. It's a big poofer.
On my commute, I'm just bundling improperly. It's been cold out here, and I have this e-bike that I'm heavily modified that goes quite quickly.
Yes, yeah.
like
I mean, you're going to get some wind burn. I would like when it gets cold. I wear snowboard goggles, face mask.
Right.
I do the whole.
Okay, so let's say there's a commute on your one wheel where you forgot your goggles and you're riding, and it's like the wind is so cold it's stinging your face.
Yeah.
Is it better? Here's the question. Is it better to go quicker, even though that increases the pain, to get it over with faster? Yeah. Or is it better to slow down a little bit so that way the burn
less pain for
on
longer
your face?
Time. Yeah.
Which one's better?
I don't know. I remember as a kid I don't know why this just would like obsess me all the time, thinking about fuel efficiency. Because it'd be like, if you drive 120 on the highway, it's way less fuel efficient than if you drive 95 or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but I'm also getting there 20% faster, So is it 50%? I think it is actually, the numbers are in favor of going slower, but it's still the same kind of question, right? Is do I burn hot and fast, or do I go low and slow?
Well, did you do the classic question, the mental exercise of, will you get more wet if you run through the rain from the rain hitting you versus if you walk slowly because it's only falling? Do you remember that?
No, I do, but I haven't done that. There's so many.
That one was finally, to be clear, that one was finally debunked, that it is certainly, you get less wet if you run. That one's
less
been
wet
debunked.
If you run, because
if you spend less time in the rain, you will be less wet.
Yeah.
Period.
I think I'm fine with that, because the surface area, sure, is increasing, but it's probably only increasing by maybe 2 or 3, I don't know,
droplets per centimeter squared.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, 2 or 3 droplets per centimeter squared.
Okay, so
I don't know,
because even the e-bike has these modes where you can like tone down the speed, and part of it is like the thrill of just riding the e-bike quickly is exciting, so that makes it engaging for me.
Yeah.
But if I like tone it down a little bit on the one, because what will happen is usually on my commute home, I'll stop by the gym on the way home, and I'll get a little sweat going, and then I'll put back on my commuter gear. Like I wear this like big orange jacket so that way I don't get killed by cars.
Yeah.
I'm super big on staying alive.
Yeah, big fan of not living.
And I wear this big spaceship helmet that it like.
Is it like a Ruroc? Oh, cool.
So I've got like a spaceship helmet with.
That is so cool.
With a full face visor, so my face is covered.
I actually really want that.
Yeah, it's great. It's the Bell.
Yeah.
It's a pretty classic Bell design. It's called the Custom 500. It's made after one of those like.
That's just like a motorcycle helmet, right? I mean, it's
100%.
Yeah.
And I felt that was responsible and prudent because I was going motorcycle speeds on my electric bike.
Yep.
And then I'm having to answer the question of like, okay, do I slow down or do I channel like my inner Andrew Huberman and just go, this is cold training, like go quicker. Like maybe I should take the jacket off and do cold exposure.
Yeah. This is actually an ice bath. That's why I'm doing this. I mean, if it's post gym and you're all sweaty, you probably shouldn't do that. Maybe on the way there you can do it. Maybe that would be good.
When I have some of these distinct experiences where I see someone else's home or space or where they make out of, that are some of my most cherished experiences because I really value seeing someone's day in and day out of their life. And this is probably one of my biggest gripes with creating YouTube videos that are your own life, is that it sometimes creates a sense that when you view those people, you get a sense of what their day-to-day life looks like.
Yeah.
But the problem is that it's still 8 to 15 minutes of highly edited video, that a lot of decisions were there, and not that the creator's being deceitful, but it's not actually an accurate picture of what life looks like.
Of course. Well, the actual, like, let's take a vlog, right? A real day in the life vlog. It starts with my alarm clock going off and, there's a shot of me sitting up in bed and I'm going to get cereal, right? The viewer sees day in the life as he wakes up, he has cereal. The actual day in the life of he wakes up, he makes sure the camera's ready. Does it have batteries and media? Okay, I'm going to put it over here. Okay, alarm shot, hand, hit. Was that right? No, that wasn't quite right. Actually,
has a conversation with his wife about, oh, you need to change in here real quick? Okay, I'll stop. I'll wait.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll edit it out. Psych, it's the thumbnail now. Got him. Just kidding. I would literally never do that. But I feel like I've seen that many times on the internet. So, but you're right. The actual day in the life is very different than what you see, if only because much more of what you're doing is the act of making that day in the life video than you're actually going to see. And maybe that's why there was such a charm to people seeing those Casey Neistat vlogs for the first time of like, let me grab the camera, because it tells the viewer that, oh, part of this day of whatever going to Samsung meetings is also I have to go back and get the camera for that shot. It's more incorporated, and even he would probably be the first one to say that was not an entirely authentic day in the life view, right? It was methodical and thought out. He would be self-aware enough to know that including the shot of getting the camera gives the perception of, right? It just gets very meta very quick.
And that's why being there in person as it gets made, I love those experiences. Love. And I'll do almost anything to get them. To get
a hit.
And it's like seeing Casey make one of those vlogs in person. Like I wouldn't trade that. Like that's an experience I now have that I wouldn't trade.
Yeah.
Like I value that so highly in the lessons I learned from just seeing that happen. Specifically, I can be very envious when I see someone else's content where it looks like the rhythm of their life is more enjoyable and fruitful than I can be like, man, why don't I live in New York City where life's more exciting? But I have a friend from Vernon, British Columbia, and I will never forget that I was doing a van trip and I drove through his town and I went and visited him. And at the time we had been doing some video calls together and he was kind of helping me. This was 2016 and I was just trying to figure out what are the kinds of things I'm going to focus my time on to try to do for work.
Yeah, that's when you were trying to get into social work.
Trying to get into social work. Because I had like made a film that I really liked, but I hadn't found a way to generate revenue off it specifically. And this was someone who was more experienced than me. His name's Justin Jackson. He runs a podcast company that actually we host our podcast on. So thanks Transistor and Justin. But I remember visiting him and he, again, was from a small town in British Columbia. And that experience of stopping by his house, but then getting to see his life with his kids at home, and then travel with him from his house down. Oh, its internal temp got too high. My camera just did it as well. That's why it turned off.
You're probably right. Yeah.
Maybe we have to do this with not A7 IVs. Maybe I have to turn off the low heat setting. That's probably it.
I probably do too. This is Christoph's.
Okay, I'll pick up from there. The experience of commuting with him down to this co-work office, and this was the first time I had ever heard of something like this, a co-work office. That experience of seeing him like doing a day in the life with him, that was modified because I was there, but like visiting his local coffee shops and chatting with the baristas that he would talk to every day.
Yeah.
I realized like, oh, he's doing a small town British Columbia version of something that I want. Like I want to be able to have a place to go to work and to like see people and to have a rhythm and a space. And so that kind of imprinted in me, and I just figured, okay, maybe one day in my life I will have something like that similar.
Yeah.
And I went down my own trajectory of doing a lot of van life travel, which had elements of that in its own way. But especially in this new chapter of life where we are anchored to a location more often because we have kids currently. Well, we don't plan to get rid of them, but because now we have kids.
You know what? Plans change. You may soon.
Plans change. Ember's growing up so fast. Yeah. She's going to college tomorrow. Well, I'm coming back to you now in the commute thing where this was another profound experience for me. Janelle and I drove across Canada and we spent about 10 days, 2 weeks parked in Hamilton, and I got to see the rhythm of your life there. And this was another experience where I remember just saying to Janelle, like, I need something like this. And I mean, part of it is that you have more of a community of other people that are filmmakers, creators in your exact spot. Like you literally were sharing an office with people.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question to you is like, what does your week look like when you're traveling to this office? And I guess the spirit of it is, do you find value in having a place to go to where other people are? And like, do you value going to work, like going to a workplace?
Yeah. So I've been freelance for, I don't know, 13 years, something like that, maybe more. And, the first half of that is me mostly just shooting weddings. So I was freelance, same idea. Like mostly I would edit from home, in my bedroom, just had a desk with a computer. But when I first got married in 2012, we had it was kind of a 1-bedroom apartment. It was kind of just a bachelor, there wasn't a door over to our bedroom. So it was much harder to have a distinct, even just desk to work from. And so I was just working from coffee shops all the time. And there was one big coffee shop / roastery that was about a 20-minute walk from me. And it was about a 20-minute...
What's it called?
This place, Green... I can't remember even. It was in Toronto. I was still living there.
One of the coffee shops in town, we get coffee from Hamilton, and I can't think of the name of it, but it would have just been cool if it was the same. But it starts with a D. I don't know the name. Okay.
Oh, Detour?
Yeah.
Yeah, Detour make
we
great
have Detour coffee.
Yeah,
great coffee.
That's cool. They just bought
sponsored.
A friend of mine's coffee shop. Anyways,
so you'd work at it.
I would work there because, we couldn't afford office space at the time. I was running a business with a friend, and a lot of coffee shops, especially small coffee shops, I feel bad just like taking one of the 8 chairs for a whole day. But this place was really big. They had couches, little board game areas, and you could buy just large carafes, like 2 liters, 1 liter of coffee at a time. And so we would just go there and we would start with one of those and a couple muffins, and we'd try and buy like maybe one other muffin in the day.
Yes.
Just to count up, right? If we're getting a liter of coffee and 2 muffins a day, like how much does that cost?
It's not a crazy amount of money to go to a coffee shop every day.
So I've kind of always needed a place to go to feel like I'm putting my brain over there. It's much harder to do that from home, I find. And I think some of that is...
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do the coffee shops in your area, have they started to put out little signs that say, please be courteous, only stay here 2 hours?
There's a few. Some places, there's one coffee shop that's like, they just say like, there's no computers, no phones. Yeah. They're just like, sorry, we don't want that here. Just talk to each other.
Which I respect, because certain places should be like that.
So do I. And I think especially because people are just going to go there and take up actual space that they could use for actual customers who, want to buy food. And you're right. Some places should just be like, hey, everyone knows that as soon as one person pulls out their phone, it's like a yawn, right? It's contagious. Yeah. Other people start doing it and whatever. Sometimes that's fine. Sometimes it's not. And if you want to have a coffee shop and it's not, then don't. But not all the places.
So you like a place well,
Here's the actual point, right?
You like a place to put your brain when you're doing creative work.
Yes. And most of that comes down to the fact that of just like object permanence, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just things that are out of sight, out of mind. And whatever's in sight is what is in mind. And I think this is why phones can be such a problem, because it's just whatever the thing I'm looking at, it's all I'm thinking about. I stop thinking about time. I stop thinking about the projects I need to be working on. And even though I can find that like interesting research rabbit hole to be incredibly cognitively rewarding, it still means everything else has become out of sight, out of mind. And that's where it gets really damaging. So when I have a place to go to work, it feels like time for me to put in front of me the things that I need to be working on. It's putting it into sight. Whereas at home, I just really struggle to do that, especially when I could do the dishes or clean some stuff up or hang out with the kids or whatever, play VR.
When you're talking about permanence, object permanence, and what's immediately in front of you, do you then, because I'm almost a little embarrassed that I wasn't cluing into this aspect before, but do you find value in that transition time of the commute?
Yeah, absolutely.
So on your way to the coffee shop, on your way to the office, explain that to me.
Yeah, I would say I walk to and from the studio 80% of the time. It's about a 25, 30-minute walk, which is, I think, the perfect amount of time for a walk. It's not so long that you have to dread it. And if I really needed to, I could kind of do a light jog and cut that in half. But it's long enough to help at least a little bit with that transition. I still find even getting back home, transitioning out of work brain is very difficult, especially because I open the door and it's like two kids like, Dad! And then just like chaos ensues for the next 2 hours before bed or whatever. But it's worse when I go straight from like edit, close Final Cut, get in the van 3 minutes later, and then I'm there in home mode. So giving myself a little mental space between leaving the house, coming to work, and then leaving work and going back to the house, I find very helpful. And also a little bit like it selfishly, let's say, but in like a helpful, selfish way. I find just the walk itself is just really good for me to be able to like breathe fresh air. I'm in Hamilton. It's smog, but whatever. Actual, not recycled air anyways. I think for my mental health, just walking often and just like getting that little bits of exercise is really good. I mean, you know what it's like when you spend 8 to 12 hours editing. You do that a few days in a row. You're like, my body is atrophying. It doesn't work anymore. I need to do something physical. And I used to one wheel all the time, but now I like walking. I just find it nice. So I basically one wheel if I'm in a hurry and the weather's good.
And the weather's good. There's something about a warm weather one wheel rip when the roads are cleared of all the salt and the gravel.
Just go for
and
hours.
You can just like carve on pavement. There's something about that experience that is hard to touch.
It's magical. What about you? So you've been riding the bike. How long of a bike ride is it?
Couple more questions on that real quick. When you're experiencing that commute, is your experience of that like stumbling through the motions, or are you actively like, is it something that you're just doing with your body and your mind is following along and arriving at the place it arrives, or like on your walk to work, are you going, okay, now I got to go to work and I got to think, like what's your experience in the thought process as you're moving through space?
Well, I really enjoy my walk. So sometimes I'm trying to think about work things. Sometimes I'm trying to like brainstorm what I'm going to do when I get here. I find though that my walk is so enjoyable that I get really quickly distracted from the work thing I want to think about. Because I'm just enjoying my walk. And sometimes it's a podcast or whatever that I'm listening to and I'm getting lost in that. But I take a lot of different alleyways from my house to the studio. There's like 15 to 20 different ones that I can take. And so I just take different alleyways, different side cuts and stuff like that. And I just find so many interesting things to look at. People have like weird backyard pits of like, I found this like concrete pig statue recently. Just, I don't know. I find that so nice.
Yeah, what I hear you describing when you're saying that is almost a practice of being present.
Yeah.
And a practice that you're not needing to work at doing, but a practice that you are just doing.
Yeah.
Like that, and I think this is something that is so helpful for living in a fleshy sack of bones with skin wrapped around it, is to do things where instead of striving or pushing or planning, you are participating in observing and actually just being in the lived experience.
Yeah. And I think this is why like the tips things can be so hard, because when you're doing the tips, it feels like the opposite of that. At least for me, it feels like I'm trying to do the thing. I'm not doing the thing. I'm working on being the person who can do the thing.
Yeah.
And
well, because
sometimes you just got to do that for a while.
Okay. So in the headspace of Levi a year and a half ago, if I heard what you're saying right now, your daily walk is helpful for your mental health and it's good for you. Like if I heard something like that and I observed, if I took account of my own lived experience and I went, okay, I haven't been going on daily walks right now. Maybe a handful of times a week, I'll go on a mountain bike ride or those kinds of things, but I'm not doing a daily walk. So if I want to experience the benefits that Jesse has, I need to implement a habit, a practice where at 7:30 in the morning or right after dinner, I then do a thing, which is get ready to go on a walk and then go do the task.
Yeah.
And right there, that task word, for me, I can like observe these practices that are helpful. And even just hearing you describe this commute to work, I can take account of my life and go, well, at this stage of my life, I'm working at home. So in order for me to get some of those benefits, I need to exercise discipline and good decision-making and planning ahead and planning for this to happen. And at this stage, acknowledging planning things to happen for me where a decision has to be made to do it, it has to be so overwhelmingly stimulating that of course I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Or so like you got to be like, I'm going to be letting someone down because I go for my walk with Daryl next door or whatever, right? There's someone waiting outside for me.
Yeah. Like for me, a mountain bike ride, if I go a week without riding my mountain bike and it's mountain biking weather, I feel compelled to go do it. But some of these practices of just being a good human, like going on walks, I don't feel always compelled to do the behaviors that I know intrinsically. Like if you told me going on walks are good for you, of course.
Yeah, right, of course. But getting yourself to do it is another thing. And I even find since becoming someone who mostly walks as my form of commuting, I'm more likely to go on walks. Like some days at the end of the day, after we've put the kids to bed, I feel like I need to decompress. I'll just be like, I just need to go for a walk. And I'll just walk over to like, walk around the city sometimes, or I'll walk over to the trail systems nearby. And, I just, because I'm walking, I'm more likely to walk. And that is true of basically every practice in my life, right? The more I'm trying to like force a thing isn't necessarily what makes it happen. It's just like the more I do it, the more I do it. And we talked about this a bit like in Hawaii, how I was finding that I didn't realize how much easier I found daily video making just for the very reason that I'm doing it daily. And because I'm doing it daily, it's in front of me. It's just on my mind. And so the barrier to getting into that state of work is so much lower than it would be in a situation such as now, right? Exactly this situation.
And that's where this experience of being to live life alongside you for a couple of weeks is still imprinted in my life, where I just kept saying to Janelle, like almost every day that we were there, because Janelle was like taking Ember out on walks and she was loving the city life too, checking out all these different new thrift shops. And then we'd come back to the van at the night and it was fun to be able to experience. Like, I don't say this lightly. I value British Columbia and the mountains we have here so much. So much so that I named my company after it.
Yeah.
left coast media house. Like literally the coastal mountains here are a very big part of what gives me life. And like right now I'm looking out my window at north facing mountains and it's mountains everywhere.
Really?
So yes.
You haven't shown me that view yet. I'm so jealous of that.
For me to even have a thought process that's even somewhere close to, maybe I should move to Hamilton so I can have some of what Jesse has.
Yeah.
And what I observed that you had, again, is this thing that I've observed other people having, which is the home place that you're at, and then this commute process to a workplace and then back home, and getting to participate and taste a part of that and riding one wheels and that experience of actually commuting to work and then coming home from work. I'm embarrassed that I didn't internalize what was working about that better. And I think this is a pretty common theme that I'll do, where something about an experience will be enlightening to me, where it's like, hey, this is good. Like, I like this. But then I'll take the wrong lessons away, where I'll go, the only reason why that was good is because I was traveling with Jesse to a studio that had 8 other people working at it. And it's because Jesse had 8 other people close by that it was good.
Right.
And I won't take away the smaller bite-sized lessons, which is the commute to a workplace is good.
Yeah, right. But now you're doing it.
Now I'm doing it. And this is probably a good place to button this up and address next time. But there was kind of, it's almost like one of those moments that you imagine therapy is for, where suddenly you like, I communicated an experience and something that I've been struggling with. I've communicated a period of my life that I've had a lot of feelings about. I communicated what I feel about those things to my therapist. And at the end of that, the therapist was able to point out a thread in there that I could not see myself. And that experience was really exciting and powerful to have at this stage of my life. And it has motivated a certain amount of like behavior change starting in December. Behavior change that I don't think I would have been ready for if I didn't treat last year the way I did, which last year I basically cut my creating and content production down by almost 80%.
Wow.
It was almost forced upon me by the state that I had put myself to. I had lived so unhealthily, accidentally, in ways that I didn't understand for so long, that even though I thought I should be in a better place, all of my behavior wasn't adding up to enabling that. And so I was stuck in that place of like, I just need the magic routine to fix this. But there was so much bigger things that were contributing to just a buildup. And when there's a buildup, and I think this is why a lot of people end up getting ADHD diagnoses in the 10-year window after they move out of their parents' house.
Yeah.
Because at about that year 10, where you're no longer in someone else's, you can build up so much accumulative baggage in that 10-year window that by the time the 10th year comes around of doing it on your own, you're suddenly, like, for the first time, completely actually shut down and crippled, where it's just so overwhelming.
Yeah. And I find it encouraging to think that in all likelihood, these like realizations, let's say, of self-realizations anyways, they're not going to stop anytime soon, right? That like probably 10 years from now, the insights we'll have on the certain kinds of like issues that we're going through right now are probably going to be tremendous. I hope anyways, that they'll be very helpful insights for whatever 40-something-year-old us or looks like. But it is just nice to know that like, no matter like how bad and how like thick of it things feel, that I almost always eventually find some sense of relief for that. And so I like to try and just feel comfortable in the stresses of some of these things. Like, I've gotten really good at feeling comfortable with just no money, because I just think that alone is a good survival tactic. Just to not throw myself into fight or flight, to say that like, okay, maybe I'm going through a bout of depression or anxiety, or maybe I'm just like completely unsatisfied in my creative work. Okay, cool. What does that actually tell me about me or my current state? Does that mean that those things aren't working? Does it mean that like something else in my life is kind of affecting this? Like, it could be any number of variables. And so I try not to get too attached to thinking I know what the thing is. Otherwise, I'm just looking for tips. Otherwise, I'm just like, I know the problem. And so if you know the solution to that problem, everything will be fine. But I think the truth is, I very rarely really know the problem, or I'm actually assessing it properly, because maybe I do know the problem. Maybe the problem is that I have too many apps on my phone, right? And maybe that is an easy solution, but probably not, right? Like, phones don't cause addictive behavior. You can be addicted to them, but they're not the source of an addictive personality, right? And oftentimes the real thing you need to address isn't just the immediate temptations, but they're like, well, why the heck do I just always want to do it?
My internet just completely crapped out.
Yeah, I saw that.
We're finishing this quickly. Next time, are you okay can we talk about this really big breakthrough that my therapist helped me have in the realm of, okay, my tease for it will be, instead of focusing so much on the deficit nature of who I am, focusing more on the abundance nature of like what will work best for my brain. Yeah.
And I like that. I like that a lot.
This commute conversation about how powerful it is to have things built into your life that you don't have to choose to do, but you just participate in, and they just so happen to be really healthy. That's kind of all attached and part of it. So I'm grateful that we were able to spend quite a bit of time like talking through that today, because that's a big part of it.
That's great. I mean, and I hope I made it clear enough that also I love the commute, and I'm sure there could be ways that I like it less, and then it becomes a thing I dread. But I've made it a thing that I don't rush my walk. I go slow, I look around at things, and I try and make it an actual enjoyable experience, so that at the bare minimum, there are those 2 moments of the day where I go like, I'm looking forward to that.
That's beautiful. And so the extreme solution is I need to move to an entirely different area of the country to have the same thing, right? That's what I need to do?
That is correct. Just come here, but bring the mountains, because I often feel the opposite of you, where I go like, yeah, sure, I've got people, but I crave mountains. I wish I could say that more. Like, I genuinely feel most alive, I don't know, most joy when things are tall. I need height around me. So, bring them with you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Make Stuff Club. We've got a video version of the podcast on YouTube. And the benefit of that, even if you listen to the audio versions, is that we've got highlights that we're going to be uploading there. It's kind of short, bite-sized little nuggets to, contribute to your week and your creative journey. Our theme music is by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. This has been this episode of the podcast, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.